In this Java tutorial, I want to go over looping and what it means to loop, and when is it useful to loop through something. Now, looping is a mechanism by which we allow code to repeat more, so a line of code to repeat more than once. And so I'll start here with just a simple class. I'll just call it looping. Now, because thus far we've been working on just coding a class and putting our main method within that class. That's what we're going to do here. We have our looping class. Within the class, we're going to code the main method, public static void main. An array of string called arguments, args. And then all the code that we want to execute is going to have to be within the main method, right? Anytime that you run code, and I've said this repeatedly in these tutorial videos, anytime that you run a class in Java, it looks for a main method. And if it doesn't have a main method, you'll get an error. Not all classes have a main method. We'll look at those kinds of classes later on, but thus far we've been working with classes that have a main method within. And so this looping class, we want to explore using loops. Now let's say that you want to make a simple program that prints the numbers 1 through 10, right? Just it's a simple program. All it needs to do is print the numbers 1 through 10. And I guess the inefficient way of doing this would be to use a print statement, system.out.print. Remember that the ln stands for new line, so that after you print what follows on a new line, and you would print something like 1. I'm gonna save this. I'll go here, and under AP Computer Science A, we'll go here to fundamentals. Looping is a fundamental concept, and I'll save it here. Compiles without any error, so Control B compiles, and then I'm going to run Control R, and it prints a 1, right? And so if the objective is to print the numbers 1 through 10, we could then copy this and paste and then put a 2. And then we could copy and paste and then put a 3. And I believe we get the idea here that if we want to print the numbers 1 through 10, we can do it this way. However, you see how many lines of code this would take. It would take exactly 10 lines of code. And you would have to go in here and individually change this. And there's a better way to do this, and that's to use a loop. Now I'll stop here because you can already see how inefficient this is. I'll compile and just run for the sake of seeing here. So it prints the numbers 1 through 7. I still need 8, 9, and 10, but I'm going to stop here because what we did here is we ran the same command, a print statement, 7 times, and we could continue to 10 times. And the only thing that changed here was this argument, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is an integer value, right? And so when we're repeating a print statement, that is exactly what we're doing. We're repeating a print statement. And so instead of printing the numbers 1 through 10, we can use a loop. And there's a few different types of loops. I guess we can start here with the for loop. And let me explain how the for loop works. You start with the word for, and then inside parentheses, we're gonna basically put 3 things. We want to make a variable and initialize that variable to something. And so in this case, I could make, I specify the data type. I want to say that it's always going to be an int, but I haven't encountered an occasion where this is not an integer. So we'll say int. you give the variable name x, if you will, and initialize it to a value. Now here, this is up to you, right? What you initialize it to, but you start thinking about what you're trying to do. Well, I want x, the first value of x, to be 1. That's because that's the first number I want to print, 1. And then you look, you code the a conditional statement, or basically a Boolean expression. That Boolean expression is something that evaluates to either true or false. And so in this case, I could say something like x less than or equal to 10. Now I put a 10 here because that's the last number I want to print. And so this is called a Boolean expression because it's going to evaluate to either true or false. Is x, whatever x is it less than or equal to 10? And the answer can either be true or it can be false. And then finally, you, after semicolon, notice that we're using semicolons here. After you provide the amount that you want x to increase by or decrease by. And we do that more than one way. So you've seen different expressions by which we can increment or decrease the value of x. And so I would say I want x to increase by 1. So I want x to start at 1. That's right there. And then I want x to increase by 1 because I want to print all the numbers 1 through 10. And so the short way of increasing a variable, incrementing a variable by 1, is to write the name of the variable x and then do a plus plus. That increases it by 1. And then inside of these curly braces, we're going to write the statement that we want to repeat, the line of code that we want to execute multiple times. And that would be this print statement. So I would copy that and paste it. And rather than hard code a number, this is what we've done here. We've hard coded the numbers, meaning we've put the actual number in the print statement. Here instead, I'm going to use a variable. I'm going to print the variable x, the value of x. Now, why is this called a loop? Well, because we initialize x to 1, and then we check this condition. We say, is x less than or equal to 10? And if it's true, if x is less than or equal to 10, which is it's true, 1 is less than 10. If it's true, then we go ahead and execute this statement. Print the value of x, which is 1. Then after we're done here, we're done with this print statement, then we go to the increment, the incremented portion, the incrementor of the loop, increase x by 1. And so we loop back up here, increase x by 1. So that's why it's called a loop, because we're looping. And then when you increase x by 1, x is now 2. You check the condition once again. Is 2 less than or equal to 10? The answer is yes. And so we come back in and print the value of x, which is now 2. And then we could symbolically put some arrows. So allow me to highlight this and just paste. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in just in OneNote here, so I can try to help you visualize what's going on. And so what we do here, once again, we start x at 1. And once we start x at 1, we carry out this print statement. And then we print, well, as a matter of fact, I skipped. Once we start x at 1, we check the condition. If the condition is true, we come in here and print, right? And let me just quickly erase this. There we go. And so once we, let's keep this right here. If the condition is true, we print. And after we print, we loop back, increment x, and so x is now 2. We once again check the condition. If it's true, we print again, and we print 2. And then we would once again loop back and increase x to 3. Check the condition. If it is true, print, and you get the point here. And so we keep looping and until we get to a value here of x equals 10, right? We're going to get here to x equals 10, and we're going to print 10 because 10 is still less than or equal to 10. It's equal to. And then we're going to, once x is 10, we're going to come in here, increase x to 11, and then we're going to check to see, is 11 less than or equal to 10? And the answer is false. It is not. 11 is not less than 10. 11 is not equal to 10. And so we exit the loop at that point. And so what we end up doing here is printing the numbers 1 through 10. And notice how many lines of code it takes to do that. We have a total of really only 2 lines, right? The heading here and the print statement. And so let me go ahead and erase this because this would not be the best way to do this. Let me run it. So I'll compile. Okay, yeah, that was my son, so let's go ahead and continue here. So let me run this. Control R will run, and notice how it prints the numbers 1 through 10 without having to put 10 print statements. Just one print statement inside a loop. This is a for loop. Curly braces tell you where the loop starts and where the loop ends. Okay, so now you can get pretty creative with these for loops. They're used a lot, and so it is good that you start getting more and more comfortable with them. But let's say that you want to, instead of printing the numbers 1 through 10, you want to maybe print all the even numbers between 1 and 10. So the even numbers would be 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, right? Well, that means that we'd start at 2, because that's the first number I want to print. We still want to go until x is less than or equal to 10. But instead of adding 1, that's the short way of adding 1. There is a long way for adding 1 to x. It would look like this: x equals x plus 1. Instead of adding 1 to x, we can say x equals what it used to equal plus 2. And so I can put a 2 there. So x is going to be 2. 2 is less than 10, so we check the condition. We print 2. We loop back up here to the incrementer, so we increment x by 2, and so x is now 4. We check the condition again. Is 4 less than or equal to 10? The answer is yes, so statement is evaluates to true, and so we print 4. We loop back and add 2 to 4, x is 6. Check the condition, print, and that's the looping mechanism outlined here, okay? We start initialize, check the condition right here in red, and then print if the condition is true, and then we loop back, increment, check the condition, print, and that's why it's called a loop. Now there's also another word that we used a lot. Well, let me compile and run here. And then we have the even numbers, right? Every time that we execute the print statement, we call that an iteration. So we've iterated a total of 5 times right here, 5 iterations. And so that's another word that's going to be used a lot when we're looping iterations. We are not restricted to only check to see if a number is less than or equal to 10. We could instead here, let's say that we want to go down. We want to print the even numbers still between all the even numbers between 1 and 10, but we want to start with 10 and then go down 10, 8, 6, 4, and 2. So the first number we would want to print is 10. And we want to print all the numbers that are greater than, in this case, greater than, where's that right there, or equal to I'll just put greater than 0, because 0 is technically not an even or an odd number. So I only want numbers that are bigger than 0. That's what this is going to check. So if this is a true statement, print. And instead of increasing x by 2, that's what we're doing here, x is equal to x plus 2, we're going to decrease x by 2. And so we're going to say x is what it used to be, minus 2. And so we come in here, we're going to get 10. Is 10 greater than 0? The answer is yes. So we print 10. And then we loop back up here, and we say x is what it used to be, 10 minus 2, that's 8. Is 8 greater than 0? The answer is yes. So we print the 8, and we loop back and loop back, and we can compile, and we can run. And now you see the same thing, all even numbers. And now we're starting at with the bigger number. We're printing that bigger number first. Now we've looked at the modulus operator, and I just want to mention it here because we want to obviously incorporate what we have learned already. Because right here, this statement was executed 8 times, meaning we had a total of 5 iterations. Now let me take you back to this, okay? We start at 1, we go on to x is less than or equal to 10. So we're just, instead of going down, we're gonna keep going up. And let me compile and run here. What happened? Oh, I started at 1 instead of 2, right? This happens to print all the odd numbers because it's gonna be 1, and then 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 plus 2 is 5. And so I need to start at 2, right? If I want the even numbers. There we go. Now this corresponds to 5 iterations. You did a total of 5 iterations. Now let me show you how you can still print even numbers, but instead of iterating 5 times, you were going to iterate 10 times. So we go back to the original for loop where we say x is 1. We want to execute the loop while this condition is true for all values that are less than or equal to 10. So basically all x values that are less than or equal to 10 are gonna print, and I want to increase this by 1, and the short way of writing this is plus plus. Right, so this iterates a total of 10 times. Basically every iteration corresponds to 1 loop, right? So it loops 10 times, and every one of those times is called an iteration, right? Now how can I print even numbers while still looping here 10 times? And you might ask yourself, what's the point of doing that? Well, maybe there's no point to doing that. It's just the fact that we can do it, and because we're going to see it later on as we keep expanding in on our programming here. And so I'm going to write here for every x value starting at 1 that is less than or equal to 10 and incrementing x by 1. I'm going to use the modulus operator. Remember that we've looked at the modulus operator, and if you haven't, take a quick look at the video on the modulus operator. We're going to say that if x modulus 2 equals 0, remember that x modulus 2, the percent symbol is read as modulus. X modulus 2, that gives me the remainder when I divide x by 2. And so when I divide x by 2, any value, I have 2 possible remainders, 0 or 1. If x is an even number, the remainder when I divide an even number by 2 is 0. If x is an odd number, the remainder when I divide an odd number by 2 is 1. And so I'm going to check to see if the remainder when I divide x by 2 is equal to 0. And that is only going to be true for even numbers. I want to print x. Now I can put the curly braces, so I'll mention this here, and I've mentioned it in the previous videos, but I'll put the curly braces here. But when you only have 1 line of code within your if statement, and in this case we only have that 1 line of code, you can omit the curly braces. You don't need them. Now, if you want, just for your sake, just always include them, but you wouldn't need them. And so I'm going to compile here, and I'm going to run. And notice that I still get the even numbers 2, 4, 6, and 8. The difference is, though, that there was not a total of 5 iterations, or I didn't just loop 5 times. I actually looped 10 times. So there was 10 iterations, but this was true only 5 times. That means that x was 1, and that when 1 is x equals 1, this is not a true statement, so you don't print. And then x is 2, this is a true statement. The remainder is 0, and so you print 2, and then x is 3, and so you're looping, but you only printed those values. Now, how do you ensure that you're actually looping, or how do you go on to verify that we looped 10 times? Well, let me, outside of the if statement, let me put something like, just print a symbol here. We'll just put an asterisk, so like that. Now I should see when I don't print the, well, actually I should see it every single time. Even when I print even numbers or when I don't print the odd numbers, I should see the star here. And so if I compile and I run, notice here that you didn't print the 1, but you printed a star. You printed the 2 right here in the if statement, and then you printed the star. So those 2 are from the second iteration, the second loop. And then you don't print the 3, but you do print a star. You print the 4 and a star. You don't print the 5, so on and so forth, right? So this is how for loops work. You're gonna see that for loops are very useful when we start getting into arrays, because they let us traverse an array, which is what we're gonna focus on a lot as we solve some of these problems. Now, just one last thing here is that you can get pretty creative here with these for loops. Let's do just something neat here where we make a string, and we can call the string stars. And we can say the string is initially empty. There's nothing in it. And that we do that by putting the double quotes like that. We could also put the word null, but we'll just put the empty string like that. Now, we've seen in the past how we can add to a string. We can add something to a string. And so let's say that we do the following. Every time we loop for every iteration, and remember that there's a total of 10 iterations, because if I wanted 20, I would change this to, well, x is less than or equal to 20, right? But 10 for now. And let's say that every iteration, we're going to increment stars. Stars is going to be what it used to be, plus a star like this, an asterisk, right? And so initially there's nothing in stars, but after the first iteration there's going to be 1 star. And then we're going to loop again. In the second iteration, when x is 2, stars is now going to have 1 little star plus another star, and so it's going to have 2 stars. And so on and so forth. And let's do a print statement here where we print stars. I put starts here, where we print stars, print ln stars. After every time we add to we add 1 little asterisk to what stars has. And if I compile and run, you see this nice little pattern. Okay, you'll see this a lot. You'll practice some of these as well in class. But you have there. The first iteration, you add 1 star, and in the second iteration, you already have that 1 star, but you add a second star. And in the third iteration, you have 2 stars now, and you add 1 more star there at the end. So now you have 3. And then in the fourth iteration, you have the 3 stars from the third iteration, plus 1 more star. Again, that happens there, and then we print, right? And so you see that you end up with a total of 10 stars down here, 5 and 5. And again, if I want to iterate 20 times, and there's 10 iterations, by the way, okay, I can do the following as well. Let's look at the iteration number by putting a 1 here. Not a 1. because if we hard code a 1 like that, then it's always going to print 1. And I can show you. We've hard coded a 1 in the print statement. I mean, I've literally put 1 there. If I compile and then run, you always see the number 1. Instead, let's use x, because x is changing. It starts at 1, but x is now going to always be 1. It's going to be 2. Right here we're adding to x, right? So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So instead, I'm going to leave the colon there. Oh, I'm going to leave the colon. I'm going to put a space there. And then I'm going to print whatever x is plus a colon plus the amount of stars, right? And so if I compile here and then run, now I can see the iterations as they happen. So first iteration, second iteration, third, and there's a total of 10. If you want to loop it 20 times, which means that you want 20 iterations of this code, again, think of iterations as loops. Well, I guess I don't know if loops is the right way, but think of an iteration as every time that you loop, you perform another iteration of this code. So if I want 20, I would say, if I start x at 1, I want to keep looping until this condition is true. X is less than or equal to 10, and I want to increase by 1, so I would put 20 here, and I'd compile, and I'd run, and now you see that you have a total of 20 iterations, where every time you're adding a star to the string stars. And so that looks like this. So for loops are extremely useful, especially when you want to repeat code. Now suppose that at the end of this I wanted to print how many times I looped, right? Just once at the very end, something like you looped 20 times. If I put the print statement in here, something like this, you looped 20 times. Now if I put the print statement line 12 inside the for loop, I know it's inside of the for loop because it's between these two curly braces, those two, then I'm going to print this statement 20 times. Let me run it so you can see. And notice how it prints 20 times there. You loop 20 times, you loop 20 times. But that's not what I want. I only want to print it once at the very end. And so if I only want to print it once at the very end, I'm going to cut it from here. Sorry about that. The boy wants me to sit with him and watch a movie, but after this video. Okay, so again, I'm going to cut it from here. I'm going to cut it. Control X cuts. And I kind of lost my formatting there. That's okay. It's not a big deal. And then I'm going to paste it after the loop. And I'm going to say you looped 20 times like that. And so I'm going to compile here, and I'm going to run. And that works nice, you see? Now it only prints at the very end. So I printed the stars, and then I printed the 20. Now, but there's a problem here. And the problem is that if somebody comes in here and puts here a 10, and you compile, and you just make that one change, and you run, and you only looped now 10 times. There's only 10 iterations. 1 iteration, 2, 3, so on. There's only 10, but you still printed that you looped 20 times. And so what we need to do is we'd have to change that to a 10, and we'd have to change this to a 10, because we've hard-coded this 20. We've put the actual number, 20, right there. Instead, maybe we can make a variable. This, by the way, can be worked out many different ways. But if we're going to start at 1, and we're going to go into x is less than or equal to 10, then it's going to be 10 loops. And so we can make a variable here, something like an integer, because it's going to be a whole number. Call it loops equals 10, right? And now I can copy that and put it here. It's the exact same thing right there. I want to go until x is less than or equal to loops, and I know loops is 10. And then I would come into my print statement and I would terminate my string and then do plus loops plus, and I would delete the 20 and I would put the space and times, right? So I'm printing the string you looped plus whatever loops is plus the string times. Now if I compile and I run, now it matches up with the number of loops, and let's test it by putting changing loops to now maybe something like well, let's make it a big number, 50, and let's run it. Now if I change 50 here, where before I had to change the 50 here and here, now I only have to change it here. So if I compile and run, it says you looped 50 times, and I bet you money that this is 50 stars right here, and you can see that it has 50 iterations. Again, an introduction to for loops. Watch the next few videos to look at other types of loops, but for now, an introduction to for loops in class. When we get back, you'll be working on some assignments that have to do with your looping here, so just practice it.